grateful for my neighborhood. I live in D.C., lived here a long time. No one on my block agrees with me. They're all wacko liberals. Every Prius on my street has an Obama sticker on it. They come that way from the factory, but they haven't scraped them off. And yet I like them all. And so it's this weird little biosphere where even though we hate each other's political views, every single person is nice. And when we're gone, they pick up my newspaper and my mail. And it's just a reminder that politics isn't everything. And I'm just really grateful to come home to that every night.
That is nice. That's powerful.
Not powerful, but... I'm not getting. It's time now for the Friend Zone, where we invite one of our friends, even our misguided friends, within the building here at Fox, onto the show. Tonight we're joined by our old pal, Fox's roaming correspondent, Geraldo Rivera. And Geraldo, like taking a page out of Fidel's book, we've been monitoring your social media. And we noticed the other night that you had nice words to say about Comandante Castro. And it raised the question in my mind, what is it about this guy that so excites liberal journalists? It's not his policies. They failed, obviously. He was a totalitarian who didn't have a free press, so it can't be that. There was something, like, irresistible about the guy to liberal intellectuals and journalists. What is that?
Well, I'm not sure that I characterize myself as a liberal intellectual. Like, maybe a moderate intellectual. I'll take that. And I do definitely consider you a friend. You know, I think that Castro was one of the most charismatic figures I ever met in my 47-year career. He emanated a kind of authority. He was very colorful, humorous. I know all of the backstory, and I know how outraged so many people are that I take a nuanced view of this man. But I think he's one of the most iconic figures of the second half of the 20th century. And more than that, you know, you say he had failed policies. I guess you could say he had failed policies, although literacy and health in Cuba is better than anywhere else in the developing world. And he survived for 11 American administrations. You know, he thumbed his nose at the great Colossus.
I get it, the great Satan. But can we be honest? If he was 5 feet tall, weighed 300 pounds, and had a cleft palate, nobody would be sticking up for him. I mean, a lot of people with daddy issues looked at him and are like, oh, you're so great because you're so handsome. I mean, that was part of it, no?
I think it was more rock star than daddy.
Right, okay, whatever. I'm not a shrink, but that was his appearance was part of it.
But, you know, why is it? And you know, going back to this philosophical, ideological divide, why is it that conservatives are okay with China, okay with doing business with Vietnam, where 50,000 GIs perished, okay with doing business with Saudi Arabia, with every tin pot dictator in Africa and Latin America, except for Fidel Castro and now his brother Raul? I just don't get this selective
That's
outrage.
a fair question, but here's the difference. It's one thing to, you got to do business with the Saudis because they control the price of oil, because they get the biggest excess supply. But nobody says, you know what, I want my son to grow up to be like a Saudi sheikh. You know what I mean? Like surrounded by hookers in Dubai. Nobody hero worships the Saudi royal family or the Chinese government. They hero worship Fidel in this kind of creepy way. No?
Well, you know, look at, I think that historically, he is the most significant figure in Latin America since Simón Bolívar in the beginning of the 18th century. You know, he was someone who embodied a sense of dignity and equality for the Latin people vis-a-vis the United States and the Western world. Even though they were poor, they had a sense of pride. Even now people in Miami, some of the exiles in Miami are celebrating the death of Fidel. But in Havana and through much of Latin America, indeed through much of the developing world, his passing is a tragic event. Oh, he's 90 years old and he was sick for a long time.
Let's be totally honest. In a police state, can you really take people at their word? People wept for days when Stalin died. Presumably some felt it, but others were worried about going to the gulag. Can you really assess public opinion in a totalitarian state? Isn't it naive to say the people of Cuba feel any way at all? We have no idea, because they go to jail if they express views contrary to the government.
Well,
right?
I think that you give their secret police too high a grade in terms of their efficiency. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of thousands of people night and day in the streets of Havana, even as we speak. You know, far more than the organized outside world, the people of Cuba are truly mourning, it seems to me, I'm not there right now, the passing of this figure. Oh. Now, I also think, let me just hasten to add, I also think the Cubans are ready, willing, and eager to go from Fidel to an embrace of the United States that is, you know, Cubans love America. I think all we need to do is get cell phones there, more cruise ships there, commercial airlines have started now flying there. I think in 10 minutes, Cuba's going to be totally in the American sphere of influence.
May I ask you one question, though? As a journalist, you spent these many decades, probably close to 5, as a journalist, and the currency in your world, in your life, is freedom of expression. How can you get past the fact that Fidel didn't allow a free press or any criticism of him, a cult of personality that's antithetical to journalism? How can you get past that?
How does Donald Trump get past it with Vladimir Putin? I mean, let's be fair.
Well, Trump's not a journalist. He's like a developer or something, but we're journalists.
He's the president-elect of the United States of America. I think that, you know, Fidel, how do I get past it? I mean, that is a fair question. I think that you've got to spell out all the things that Fidel Castro did that are horrible, depriving people of property, and the political opponents that he assassinated, and you know, so forth. There's blood on his hands clearly, but there's blood on a lot of hands on a lot of people that the United States does business with.
It's about controlling people's minds. Lots of governments kill people, and it's always wrong, but it's very common. But controlling what people think is the worst sin of all, isn't it? And it's a sin that affects us directly. We're the people who say what we think. We're journalists.
I get that embrace of the Constitution and free speech, but I find it ironic that you say how Fidel quashed free speech, and yet you want to jail people that burn the American flag in contravention of the Constitution.
I'm certainly not for that. I'm for people saying what they think, no matter how unpopular.
Well, I think that, you know, when you're in... I've been with rock stars, all the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. I've been with, you know, Yasser Arafat and Charles Manson, and, you know, every dictator in general, you know, from Southeast Asia to the tip of Latin America. There are people that you connect with in a way, in an interpersonal way, that has nothing really to do with the outside world. You either like them, like I like you. I really like you. You and I come from different sides of the street. We probably agree on a couple of things in the middle there, but and yet I find you engaging in many ways. I find you refreshing in many ways. So and I come to bury Castro, not to praise him tonight.
But I hope you'll come back tomorrow night and tell us what a great guy Charles Manson is. Geraldo, it's great to see you.
He wanted to kill me. He wanted to put my head in a basket.
Fuck, bet he did. Good to thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. On that note,
coming up, it's great to see you.
He wanted to kill me. He wanted to put my head in a basket.
Fuck, bet he did.
Fatality.
I do think that younger people are better suited to do that. I'm also just saying that looking ahead, we need people who are going to be alive, right? I mean, these people are going to be phased out because people die. So we need young people.
Trump didn't run any campaign during the primaries. He spent less on the total primary season than you spent on spring break last year. Like nothing.
How did you know, Tucker? That European vacay was amazing.
Because I saw you in Florence. No, but the point is, it's not.
And I think that, you know, Donald Trump, Make America Great Again, from day one, that was going to work, certainly with his base, and it eventually permeated a larger swath of the electorate, right? Not the majority, but it got there. And with Hillary Clinton stronger together, no one really knows what that meant. And you saw even in the Podesta leaks that people were saying that.
Motto for a glue company, wouldn't it? Elmer's glue.
Could the glue be president?
No, it's a bizarre. It's a bizarre
message.
But
there was a great piece. I forget where it was. Maybe a lot on your show about fake news, right? This advent, this term, and I saw your interview earlier talking to Ms. Spade from the New York Times about it. All of this information that we're getting is coming through our phones. Young people are the future of the technological movement. I mean, that's just.
But Bernie Sanders is several hundred years old, and he won 85% of the vote.
But I'm saying he was running a young.
He's a tired man. He's exhausted. I think, frankly, in terms of his legacy, he's totally folded.
He's not that much older than you, though. There's only maybe a 2 or 3 years.
He's quite a bit older, but he wants to go home and he wants to go to bed. You know, honestly, for his legacy.
How do you know if you've never spoken to him? How do you know he wants to go to bed?
I think he's exhausted.
Well, he's exhausted.
You know what? For his legacy, he would have been better off playing it out. He's exhausted. He wants to go home and go to bed. But a lot of the Bernie Sanders
effort to delegitimize the presidential election. Some in Congress are demanding that President Obama brief them on Russian interference with the election. They say that, quote, the Russians, quote, hacked our democracy, and they're mad about it. Joining us now is one of the members who signed that letter, House Intelligence Committee ranking member Adam Schiff, Burbank, California. Congressman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So one of the complaints in this letter, which is pretty interesting, is that Russia, and I'm quoting now, hacked our political institutions by, among other things, giving us access to John Podesta's emails in WikiLeaks. Now, I'm against hacking people's personal emails, for sure. I think it's a problem. But no one contests that those emails were real and the information in them was true, and voters got to see that, and it helped them assess how they wanted to vote. Why is that bad? Are you really arguing against more information for voters?
And are you really arguing in favor of a foreign adversarial party hacking into the American...
Of course not. No, I'm explicitly not. I'm just saying that once information comes into the public view, then why is that bad?
Then if we're in agreement that we shouldn't tolerate foreign countries interfering in our election, hacking and dumping of information, then we shouldn't condone it in any way. Now, are you saying that that we're going to look the other way and we're going to ignore Russian interference because they brought to light facts that were helpful to one candidate or hurtful to the other or of public interest? The voters had a chance to evaluate that. They made their decision. But if we're going to protect ourselves from further Russian meddling in the future, we're going to have to call them out on it. We're going to have to inform the American people about it. And Donald Trump may have been the beneficiary, and I think he certainly was, of the Russian meddling this time. But when President-elect Trump has to cross Putin, as invariably he will, because Putin is not our friend. The President-elect may think Putin is our friend, but he's not. Then he may be the subject of the same interference.
I get it. Nobody's for hacking. Let me just make one clear point. You don't know that Vladimir Putin was behind those hacks.
Well, we do know this, and I can say this.
But you don't know that, so let's not pretend that you do.
Well, let's not ignore what the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence said publicly, which is that these hacks were of such seriousness they could not have taken place without the approval at the highest levels of the Kremlin.
That's speculation, and we've seen well, it is speculation.
It is not speculation. You can only say speculation.
It's a statement of fact?
It is a statement of the intelligence community's best assessment,
okay.
and
but
you can quarrel with that because there's a political reason to do it, but this is what the intelligence professionals are saying.
Well, they've told us a lot. You know, I've
seriously.
lived here a long time. I remember vividly the massive stockpiles of WMD in Iraq, which the intelligence community assured us were there, and they weren't. So, pardon me for my skepticism. I think it's a patriotic position. But let me just say this: we know.
Tucker, let me just say this: you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take
I've been following, but here's what I don't get. There's been a lot of hacking.
Ask the Republican members of the Intelligence Committee.
But here we've had hacking
think this is in dispute.
of the Pentagon, the White House, the State Department. The CIA director's personal email was hacked. We think in some cases by Russia. I don't remember you holding a press conference and saying, hey, Obama administration, your cybersecurity is pathetic. In this letter to the president, you don't mention the fact that American cybersecurity is inadequate, that the administration is partly responsible for allowing these hacks to happen. Why don't you mention that?
You haven't been watching the opening hearings. I have. I don't think you have, because if you had, you would see me pressing the administration on the failures to protect our data, like the OPM hack, taking issue with the level of our cyber protection, which is wholly inadequate. You wouldn't see the statements I made in connection with the intelligence authorization
bills year after year. Then why not mention it in this letter?
Because this letter was about Russian meddling. And if you don't think that's significant, that a power that is an adversary of ours, that's bombing civilians in Syria right now, that's invading its neighbors, is also interfering in our political processes, as well as our allies.
But
if you don't think that's serious, it's hard for me to imagine you are in the same party as Ronald Reagan.
I'm confused by what you're alleging. So you're saying that you believe the Russian government hacked John Podesta's emails and that voters knew too much, okay? Then you're saying what? That they hacked voting machines?
I'm not saying the voters knew too much.
Well, what are you saying? What are you saying?
If the Russians hack into your emails and disclose...
Which I'm against, by the way.
And I'm against, too. But if they did that and disclosed things of public interest, I wouldn't seek to justify it.
But I'm not justifying it.
I would still want to condemn the Russians and protect us.
I'm going to keep you here until you answer
hacks.
this question, which is, how specifically did the Russians make this election outcome different from what it would have been otherwise? How specifically did they, quote, hack our democracy?
We will never know, whether this was determinative any more than Director Comey's involvement in the election. The means they used were hacking into democratic institutions and the leaking of documents designed in the primary process to sow division between the Clinton and Sanders camps, something we saw actually took place as a result of that. And then in the general election to attempt to discredit Secretary of State Clinton in a way that would harm her and would help Donald Trump.
How did they do that?
Well, it was pretty obvious, wasn't it? They hacked, they released documents that were
real.
Oh, yes, they were real, and they were ones that were damaging to Secretary Clinton. Can you point to documents that they disclosed that were damaging to
but are
the
you
Republican
arguing?
Party?
Let's just get to the bottom line. You're upset because you think this affected the election. I get why you're upset. But are you arguing that voters, and other reasons too, but are you arguing that voters should not have seen that information?
This is an important point, though. It's not just the fact that it damaged the candidate I was supporting. All Americans, Democrats and Republicans, and particularly of the party of Reagan, ought to be concerned when we have Russia interfering in our political affairs.
But are you arguing that voters should not have had the right to see that information? If you could take it back, would you say voters, you're not allowed to see that information?
Well, I would say that we ought to stop Russia from doing this. Now, whether the press should publish the information or not,
do you think they should?
That is a different question. I think that there are some cases where the public interest is so great they should publish. But I also think, and this was an issue I took with the press during the campaign, that when they do publish information that the Russians have hacked and the Russians want us to see, they ought to inform the public of the provenance of those emails.
But they don't know it, and neither do you. You don't know that. You don't know that the government. I think it's really irresponsible for you to say you know that the Putin government did this.
You know what is irresponsible, Tucker, for you to make that claim without looking at the evidence, and more importantly,
you can't say that you know the Putin government did that.
More importantly, for the president-elect today. To say that he doesn't know whether the Russians. You're
on the Intel Committee. Let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not. You know what? You're dodging.
And Tucker,
look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's emails. They hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the. You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked.
You're gonna have to move your show to RT Russian television because
you know what?
This
That's
is perfect.
Just so
this is
beneath your office because it's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I'm asking you, did they hack Podesta's emails? And you can't say it.
Insults like that, Tucker.
You just said I was carrying. You said I was carrying water for Putin. That's pretty hilarious.
When you essentially are an apologist for the Kremlin, that's what you're doing.
I'm going to one last time, Congressman. Look into the camera and say they hacked John Podesta's emails. We know for a fact that Putin's government did that. You can't, and you know you can't, and you're hiding behind weasel words.
I just said that the
say they hacked John Podesta's emails.
Russians. I'm not going to be specific as.
Oh, because you don't know it. That's why. All right, done. One. You don't know it, and you're alleging it without any evidence. And
you're ignoring the evidence because you don't care. The fact that it helped the Republican candidate is all you need to know.
That's totally false. I just think if you're going to make a serious allegation about an actual country with an actual government, you ought to know what you're talking about, and you don't.
I think that you ought to accept.
I got to go. I'm taking cash from Putin now. I'm on RT.
Republicans on the Intelligence Committee have seen for a fact.
If you could say it, you would, and you can't, and you know that.
If you're willing to be in denial about this because it suits a Republican-elect president.
Okay, whatever. You can blather on all you want, man, but I gave you a chance to state it clearly, and you wouldn't, which tells you everything you know.
You,
all right,
or a president-elect.
Okay.
Not very much, apparently.
I appreciate that, Congressman. And now I need to take a call from Vladimir Putin, so I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second, do this tease. Some of the electors who will pick the president in 2 weeks are receiving death threats and demands they choose someone other than Trump. One of those electors joins us next. Also, we've talked to a lot of college activists on this show about their political views. What will happen to those kids when they graduate? The great Mike Rowe is here coming up. And then a special guest, Vladimir Putin, our puppet master, will join us at the end of the hour.
Flawless victory.
Specific as
because you don't know it. That's why. All right. Done. One.
He wanted to kill me. He wanted to put my head in a basket.
Betty Dick. Good. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. On that note.
We've got
God help us.
All right, look, we appreciate you coming on. We know how busy you are.
I'm loving it. No.
I don't get tired. It's lucky, right? High energy.